Hi, I'm Josh McGrath.
I'm Andrew Haas.
And this is the Ardent Pursuit Podcast. Today, we're diving into one of the most interesting dating topics out there, age gaps. Do age gaps matter? Are there any factors to consider when it comes to age gaps? And are most age gaps really just maturity gaps? Well, that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to try something new though. Andrew and I haven't compared notes at all. In fact, we actually don't even have any notes. And that means that what you're about to hear is off-the-cuff conversation. So buckle up because this is going to be an interesting one. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the show. You can watch it on YouTube or listen with Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And share it with your friends because changing dating culture starts with changing the conversation. I'm excited about today's topic because it's very relevant to obviously our show here. And the reality of our current culture is that as more and more people delay pursuing romantic relationships and marriage, we're going to end up with an aging population that is single. And so naturally the conversation becomes, well, if I do want to pursue somebody, I have to factor in age. And we're seeing this from Hollywood to even our local communities, relationships that are being formed with age gaps that maybe historically, and by historically I mean like the last couple decades, we're not used to seeing. We tend to see relationships that are formed with, anywhere from a few months to a few years. Maybe if you're 4 years difference, that might seem like a lot. But today we're actually beginning to see people pursue a romantic relationship where there's 5, 7, 9, 12 years difference between them. We're starting to see more of that become commonplace. So naturally, people are asking the question, is this a good thing? Should women be willing to allow an older man to pursue them? And should older men even consider pursuing younger women?
And if the alternative is no relationship, it doesn't mean every relationship should happen. But if your alternative is to not be in a relationship at all, and that is something you strongly desire, and the other person appears to be a upright, integrity-filled, quality person, age should have a much reduced role. It might naturally fall outside of what you think is normal or what you would hope for, but too often men and probably women will rule out people that would otherwise make great lifetime partners simply because their age is not what they would find to be within the normal range.
I think that's a really good point because there are a lot of single women today. I think about just kind of in the Christian circles. A lot of Bible-believing, God-loving women who are single. They want to be in a relationship. They want to be married. And it's not uncommon that they have been pursued by an older man at, different age gaps, right? Maybe 4 years, maybe 6 years, maybe 8 years, whatever. And I've seen and heard accounts of women turning down their overtures because they were like, ooh, gross. He's like, old man. And it's like, well, okay, yes, he is older. But now, fast forward X number of years, and they're still single, and they're still waiting to be pursued. Vice versa, I've actually heard and know men that I've talked to who were interested in being married, and the options available to them were women that were 5, 8, 10 years younger than them, and they refused to pursue them because they were too young. And so what ends up happening is there are opportunities to pursue romantic relationships, but people disqualify those candidates simply because of the age gap that exists. And we're not advocating that people just obliterate the age gap and start, pursuing people that are, 10, 15, 20 years younger than them. But it is a conversation that has to be had, that every individual has to figure out and navigate through. And like you said, they shouldn't disqualify a potential person to pursue simply because there's an age difference that maybe historically or culturally or even in your own community would be looked upon as, that's a little weird.
Now, the bigger the age gap, more care does need to be taken.
For sure.
And so guys need to be aware of that, and they need to take appropriate action. Rightfully so, there are cultural stigmas around, say, a much older guy pursuing a much younger woman.
Like 20 plus years.
Yeah.
The Leonardo DiCaprio examples.
And so, yeah, we might scratch our heads at that and think that's weird, and it certainly can be. And so what can a guy do if he's honest with himself that this woman who's much younger than me, I think would make a great life partner, make a great spouse. If he truly believes that and isn't just after her for her looks, what can he do? He should go to mentors, go to older men in his life, a pastor, and bring that idea to these men. Hey, I'm interested in this young woman. I think we're more or less on the same page. I think she'd make a great spouse. What do you think? And he's got to leave that door wide open for feedback and input. And through that process of gathering, input, information from other men who are older, wiser, through that, it could come to be that, yeah, this actually is a good idea. And that will help alleviate a little bit of that. I mean, you're still going to have people that make assumptions, but a guy needs to take care that he's purposeful to do it the right way.
So why are people oftentimes uncomfortable with older men pursuing women that are much younger than themselves?
Because we assume that he is pursuing her for one reason and one reason only. And we know that relationships are not sustained on looks. They are not sustained on sex. They aren't sustained on hobbies, right? We know these things actually don't predict or point toward a healthy, lasting relationship. And so when a much older guy pursues a much younger woman, we make some assumptions that it likely won't last, based on the premise that he's pursuing her for, one reason.
Culturally, the most extreme examples of age gaps tend to exist in Hollywood. And I mean, let's be honest, the vast majority of Hollywood relationships and marriages don't last, regardless of the age gap. But it is significantly increases the likelihood that that relationship will fall apart the larger the age gap that exists. And you're right. Most people in culture today, most men, older men who are pursuing women that are 15, 20, 25 plus years younger than them, they're not doing so because they see her as an incredible, wife or potential mother. They see a sexual opportunity. And rightfully so, what that has resulted in is a culture, both within the church and outside the church, where by and large, we're uncomfortable with the idea of any type of significant age gap. Now, what's funny is no one has that line per se, right? We know when we get uncomfortable, but we don't know why, where that line is. It's such a gray area because if somebody's in a relationship and they're like 3 years apart, probably no one's going to be uncomfortable. But if they're 30 years apart, probably everyone's uncomfortable. So it's like somewhere in there, there's like a different line for everyone.
Right.
And those lines are all arbitrary. They're totally based upon personal preference and what one thinks is weird.
Well, because what we're really getting at, fundamentally, we're using age as a proxy. What people are really trying to determine when they're pursuing somebody is, are we at the same maturity level?
Sure.
That's kind of what we're doing. Because if you think about it, and this is a weird example, but if a guy, a 30-year-old guy is pursuing a 25-year-old woman, that sounds pretty normal. But imagine if she had the maturity of a 15-year-old.
Be weird.
It would be weird, right? We would know. So it's not so much an age thing. It's really the maturity. And that's why older men can pursue younger women if the maturity levels are more or less there. But I think that's where we have to suspend disbelief. When we see an older guy pursuing a younger woman, for that to be a healthy relationship, their maturity levels more or less have to match. And what are the odds that a much older guy is going to be the same maturity level as a much younger woman?
Yeah.
Very unlikely.
Yep.
Now, not impossible, but that's kind of where we're like, really, buddy?
Something else is going on.
Something else is going on here.
Yeah, it's true.
And so, yeah, guys need to recognize age helps factor, you know, is this a good thing? But really, age is trying to help point us toward maturity.
And age is something we don't tend to think a lot about in our everyday life when it comes to our friendships or people we're interacting with or coworkers or things like that. I have many friends, I have coworkers who are 10 and 15 plus years younger than me. And I like to take, you know, the work environment because we're coworkers. We're both responsible. You know, we work together. We both report to the same boss, and we work together in a professional setting. And there's no distinction between the fact that there's 15 years difference between me and my coworker. But suddenly, if I was going to pursue somebody that was 15 years younger than me, I would be very aware of that. Everyone would be very aware of it. No one thinks it's weird when they meet my coworkers and I do an introduction to them and there's a 15-year age difference. No one's like, wow, that's weird. Your coworker is so young. I've never had someone tell me that. But you know what people would say if I started dating a girl who's 15 years younger than me? Wow, she's so young. And so there is like this social stigma that exists solely within the realm of romantic relationships when it comes to age gap. We don't think it's weird when it comes to friends. We don't think it's weird when it comes to coworkers. We don't think it's weird when it comes to, you know, even our elected officials. We're totally fine with there being these crazy age gaps. But as soon as it's in a romantic context, we're instantly uncomfortable.
And something that men are up against now is this idea that, you know, a lot of guys these days are growing old, but they're not growing up. And the problem with that, I mean, there's a lot of problems with that.
Sure.
But women, as they would look to a guy in their general age range, they are more and more seeing young guys or seeing men their age who actually aren't at their maturity level. These guys are growing older, but they're kind of stuck in a younger maturity. And so for men, it is imperative that they purpose to mature. As you grow old, it is so important that you mature, that you grow wiser, because that's going to put you in a place where if you're interested in marrying somebody someday, you're going to be able to attract a kind of woman that's actually going to be interested in living a life with you.
One of the greatest tragedies of the modern dating culture is that because men for decades did not take the responsibility to grow up, to mature, to be responsible men, the women of their generation had limited options when it came to romantic relationships. And now we have a generation of older women in their 30s and 40s who are single, who want to be married, who want to be mothers, but were essentially left behind because the men of their generation did not mature, did not grow up, did not take responsibility to be godly, masculine men.
And so what we have now is an entire group of older women who, for a lot of them, their only option would be to consider someone younger than them, which, not a bad thing, but there is a cultural stigma to it. But really, it's again, it goes back to that maturity thing. If there's the young guy who's got a high level of maturity, which is rare, and that's part of the problem. I think young men need to purpose to mature at a faster rate than they generally have been. But there are those exceptional young men who are more mature for their age than their peers, and they actually would make a great spouse for an older woman.
One of the things that women and men have to be willing to consider doing is actually pushing against the stigma of age gap that exists in our culture in both directions. Sometimes women who are older will actually pull themselves off the dating market simply because there's not an older man in their life who wants to romantically pursue them. Now, there may be younger men who are interested in doing it, and while that may not be the norm, there are definitely exceptions to that. And we've seen those exceptions. I know that we've got some very good friends who are those exceptions, and they've got great godly marriages, and it's awesome. But like, if a woman is going to be pursued by a younger man, she has to be okay and comfortable with that. And if a man is interested in pursuing a younger woman, whether it's a few years or many years, he has to be okay and comfortable with that. The goal isn't to say, well, everyone just needs to accept it for what it is. Yes, I know there's the age-old adage, age is just a number. Yes, it is. Age is just a number. But really what you're looking for is the maturity, the vision, the purpose, the personality. Like, is this somebody I can do life with for the rest of my life? That's what you're looking for.
And that's why it is so imperative that men and women have community that really know them. It is only going to go well if this is one of those areas where input from our community, from our people that know us well, is so important, because we just can't discern what is proper, what is right on our own. We just don't have a full grasp on reality. We have blind spots, we have biases, and this is an area where it can quickly head in a direction that's not healthy. And so here especially, and a lot of areas, but here especially, men need to seek out the input from other people if they're interested in pursuing somebody who, would by all accounts be outside of the normal age range. Call it that, 2 to 6 years younger, just to put a number on it. If she's older or much younger, not a bad thing, but a guy needs to be very intentional about who he brings into that process.
So what would you recommend to men who are interested in potentially pursuing a woman that is several years younger than them? If a guy came to you and he said, Andrew, I'm interested in Sally Sue, and he lists out all the qualities of her, but then he says, but she's 8 years younger than me. And he's really concerned about that. What would your recommendation be?
If I did not know her, I would first say, hey, okay, she sounds interesting. Bring her over for dinner sometime. Would love to meet her, would love to get to know her. And through living life with people, you can discern that maturity level, which is really the key component in all this. There are a lot of other important factors, faith and priorities, and all that will eventually come to the surface. But with the age gap in particular, what I would be looking for is, are these people, generally speaking, at the same maturity level?
Yeah.
And that's really only through getting to know them. Assuming I know him well, I'll have a sense of where he's at maturity-wise. So my goal would be to get to know her well, and there, I'd be able to provide some helpful feedback. And now the age of the guy does factor in here. If a guy is 30, if I'm talking to a guy in his 30s or 40s, and she's 8 years younger, that's going to be very different than if he's 26.
Yeah.
The age spread in the early years matters much more than it does later on.
And for the Christian man, it's really important that she also be spiritually mature. Yes, natural maturity is very important, but even more important is spiritual maturity. Now, we're assuming here that as the man, because of the age gap, you yourself are also spiritually mature. Do not be looking for something in her that you yourself are not willing to be. So that's going to be important. But for the woman that he is interested in, if the only thing that you can tell from her life that she's a Christian is because she has a Bible verse in her bio on Instagram, that's not spiritually mature. Her life actually should reflect her relationship with the Lord. It should be one of submission to Christ, one of obedience to Christ, one of service, one of laying down her life, one of purity and holiness. That's what you're looking for as a godly Christian man. Now, part of the age gap reality is that even though you might be both mature, you might both be spiritually mature, there will likely come moments in your relationship where you are going to see that age gap difference simply because of the different years that you've walked the earth, because of the different experiences you've had, through the different, because of the different historical events you've walked through. I think about 9/11, right? For anyone over the age of, 20, well, at this point, I guess 30, probably, likely, you have memories of 9/11. So if you're a 30-year-old guy, you were 6 at the time that 9/11 happened. if you're pursuing a woman who's 8 years younger than you, she wasn't alive during 9/11. So while you were no adult during 9/11, you can reference it from a firsthand account, whereas she is going to be reading about that account. So that's just a trivial example of where you're going to see that age gap exist in your relationship. Depending upon how old the guy is and how young the girl is, you might actually see even more extremes. You know, if you're someone who grew up in the 90s and you're pursuing a woman who's born in the early 2000s, she grew up in a world of technology and you grew up in a world of dial-up.
Yeah.
Your experiences and understanding of technology and email and cell phones are going to be extremely different. Now, these are all trivial. They don't really matter, but they do present themselves as you're walking life together in relationship.
And what men should be aiming for in a relationship is being as mature or slightly more mature than she is. Doesn't always have to be the case, but wisdom would say things will play out better if that is true. And so age factors in much less in that regard. Again, we can have younger women who are very mature, older men who are not as mature, and vice versa. But what we're really speaking to is when the maturity gap is too big. And that's where we're saying problems arise. But ironically, that's the really hard thing to pinpoint. So men need to really put extra effort, put extra attention toward figuring out, is the maturity gap here reasonable? Is it manageable? And are we more or less on the same page?
Maybe people are listening to us and they're getting excited about pursuing a romantic relationship with a woman where there's, you know, a bit of an age gap between them. Great. But before you do, we should also talk about some of the downsides that may exist in a romantic relationship where there is a large age gap. So, Andrew, start us off. What is a downside that comes with an age gap in a relationship?
Some of the downsides that immediately come to mind are, is she someone that you will be able to not only lead, but live a life of close friendship with? There's, you know, it's one thing to just simply find someone interesting, attractive. You know, guys can think, wow, I want to spend my life with her, because we kind of orient, we overweigh the physical, the appearance. But a guy, one of the downsides is an inability or a real challenge to lead someone much younger. That can be a challenge. It can also be a challenge to relate to them as, call it peers, as deep friends, because, you know, healthy relationships, a healthy marriage is fundamentally rooted in a deep friendship.
It's true, because I think about just younger people today that I'm friends with, depending on how young we go, they're using language and vocabulary that I'm like, no, speak English. I don't know what you're saying. So if the woman that you're pursuing or want to marry speaks a different vocabulary than you, because that's what the kids on the street are speaking. I don't even know how to put that in Gen Z terms. Because you don't have the Riz, is that what the kids say? I don't even know.
Something like that.
That is going to make friendship and therefore relationship much more difficult. And I also think, building on that idea, it's not uncommon that when someone is younger, they have vision and desire for their life. Things like travel the world and experience all these things and do all these things. And so if suddenly they find themselves being pursued by an older man, they might in the moment be excited about that. They might even find themselves all the way to the point of being at the altar and married. And then potentially waking up one day and being like, but I'm 25, I'm 27, whatever, I'm 22, and I had all these plans of traveling the world and experiencing all these things, and they're discontent, they're unhappy. There's now a misalignment of vision because they were swept up in the emotions of the moment. They were caught up in the experience of a romantic pursuit, not realizing that, wow, this really is not where I want to be right now. And that can cause all kinds of difficulty and hardship on a marriage if the visions aren't aligned from day one.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of young women seem to have this idea that their dreams, their desires, their vision is incompatible with a relationship. That those things cannot coexist in a healthy relationship or marriage.
Sure.
When yes, certain things absolutely will change, but it is just completely false to say that I can't do these things I want to do in a marriage.
And for an older man who is pursuing a woman younger than himself, it's very possible that he's had multiple dating experiences and so is bringing some type of baggage potentially to that relationship. And for a younger woman, she needs to be cautious to not get caught up in the security and stability that he might be able to offer her. She needs to rightly judge whether he's going to be a good leader, a good friend, a good husband. And she needs to do that by having accountability, by having community who help vet him.
Yes, if she is the, pick a number, the third, the fourth, the fifth, serious person that he's pursued, that's not something to dismiss. Look into that, figure out why that is there, and try to understand the full picture. Why didn't the previous relationships work out? What was there? Doesn't mean it won't work out with you. It just means really pay attention to why that exists.
One of the other downsides that can occur within an age gap relationship is that you're just misaligned on values and vision. If she's 25 and you're 40, you are in very different places in life. At 40, you're looking towards the hill of retirement. You're looking towards legacy. If you're 25, you're like in the prime of your life and feel like you've got endless years ahead of you. And so, not that it can't work, but one of the downsides is you're looking at life. You're coming at life from two very different places. And to try to merge those together to have one unified vision, one unified purpose can be more challenging.
And I think that is a really good point that not enough men really understand. An older guy could look at someone like that, a younger woman, and think, oh yeah, she's interested in me. It'll be easy. We'll just live life together. The reality is there's much more to consider. And so, yes, he needs to pay attention to, where is she at? What is her outlook on life? What are her interests? Where does she see herself going? Because that could be very different from where the guy is at.
Yeah.
Again, those things can work out. It's going to take more work. It's going to take more intentionality. And he's got to be really purposeful in how he walks it out.
Another downside that I think people think about, whether they talk about it much, I don't know, is the later years of life. So if there's a 10 or 15 year age gap between you as the man and the woman, already statistically, women live longer than men. So as the guy, you're already predisposed to die younger than your wife. Now, if you're 15 or 10 years older than her, and let's say you live to a great age of 85, and let's pretend you're 15 years older, she's 70. She might live another 25 years. That's a long time, a lot of life to be lived without your spouse. And again, not that end of life should determine your romantic pursuit, but it is a consideration to have in mind, because at some point we're all going to die. And so if you get the blessing of being able to grow together in old age, the further the gap, the less likely that you're going to die around the same time.
And so for an older guy interested in having a family, say he's pursuing a younger woman, the reality is he'll be around, hopefully, for the life of his kids in their youth, but possibly not as they grow older, and not to mention grandkids. And so, these are things that too often a guy either isn't considering at all, or just gives a passing thought to.
Yeah, his experience with his kids will be very different than his dad's experience with him. And that is the reality of starting a family at an older age as a man. Give a plug for why you should stay in shape and eat healthy. If you're going to start a family at an older age,
Amen.
You want to be able to be there to play with your kids, to rough and tumble them, to do sports with them, etc. That's like really important. Another downside to this age gap is the fact that in her family or in your family, you might find that she's younger than all your siblings and you're older than all of hers. That's awkward. That's uncomfortable. Not a deal breaker. If you're happy with jokes and you're willing to be made fun of, then it's not a problem. But it is a little weird. I would imagine, I've never been in the situation where if as the guy you're stepping in to date this girl and you're older than all of her siblings. Maybe she has 3 or 4 or 5 older siblings and you're older than all of them. It's kind of like, weird.
Yeah, just know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
Have the fortitude, have a temperament where, you can navigate the situations. They could be awkward, they could be unpleasant, they could be undesirable. Sure, okay. But still, just know what you're getting into.
Yep. Now, there might be other downsides that we haven't discussed yet. And we're not trying to scare our listeners away from any type of relationship that might have an age gap. Just as we're not trying to get our listeners really excited about having an age gap. Really what we want to do is help our listeners be able to articulate what they think when it comes to age gaps. Because it's easy to just say, well, I'm uncomfortable, I don't like that. But not know why you are uncomfortable, to not know why you don't like that. It's also easy to say, well, I'm totally fine with it, but not know why you're totally fine with it.
Yeah.
Our listeners, both men and women, need to be able to articulate, to be able to verbalize why they're okay with age gaps or not for themselves. Doesn't have to be for the general populace. It needs to be a case-by-case basis because you being uncomfortable about someone else's age gap doesn't matter. There's no weight on their life or yours. But how you feel about an age gap in your own life really matters because that will affect the type of relationship you might find yourself in.
Know the why. I think that's a great thing for men to keep at the top of mind. And don't let culture or outside influence. Those are easy fallbacks. Oh, it's weird because of this, or oh, it doesn't make sense because of this.
Yeah.
But really, guys need to be able to, on their own, their own life circumstance, be able to evaluate things on a case-by-case basis. Give it the proper weight, give it the proper time. But ultimately, a guy needs to understand for himself why or why not any situation would make sense or not.
Absolutely. So, gentlemen, as you look out at the dating landscape and you consider for yourself the opportunities that are available to you, don't disregard a potential candidate simply because there's an age gap between you and them. Rather, evaluate their character, evaluate their maturity, evaluate their love for the Lord. Invite in outside counsel and authority to help inform what you should do next. If you allow yourself to invite in these other voices and to look out and around you and say, hey, what opportunities are there? You might be surprised by the person you end up with. Someone that in this very moment you might think, I would never pursue them because of X, Y, and Z. You might find yourself a year from now engaged to them. So our encouragement to you is keep the dating options open and available, but do so with wisdom and counsel. As always, we love having you here on the Ardent Pursuit podcast, and we look forward to having you here next time. No one watches the end. No one watches the end. Yes, just do that. They won't even know, and let's go to Blair.